Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, so you're planning your first trip to New York City. You've got that mix of pure excitement and maybe just a little bit of panic, right? I mean, it's a city with a million things to do. Where do you even begin? Well, today, we're going to break it all down.
First, to get a sense of just how big this thing is, get a load of this number. Over 60 million people visit New York every single year. That's basically the entire population of Italy showing up every year. It is one of the most intense tourism hubs on the planet, which is why having a game plan is so important.
And that brings us to the big question that every first-timer asks themselves. The problem isn't that there's nothing to do, it's that there's too much to do. How in the world do you figure out what's a must-do versus a maybe next time when you only have a few days? This is where you run into that classic dilemma. On one hand, you've got to see the icons, right? The stuff you've seen in movies your whole life. But on the other hand, you're craving something real, something authentic that feels like your trip, not just another photo you saw on Instagram.
All right, so let's dive in and tackle that first instinct. We're going to look at the absolute must-see spots, the famous checklist items that really are the foundation of a classic first trip to New York.
So, what are the heavy hitters? Well, according to visitor data, the top spots are this incredible mix of nature, history, and of course, those killer views. You've got the giant green escape of Central Park, the really powerful history at the 9/11 Memorial, the endless art at the Met, and then those two legendary skyline views from the Empire State Building and Top of the Rock. And this is so important to remember. These places aren't just things to look at. They're powerful experiences. As one visitor put it, the 9/11 Memorial is deeply emotional and impactful, an unforgettable look at history. It just goes to show you the real stories these places hold. And that feeling of just, wow, it's a constant theme. I love how this visitor describes seeing the Statue of Liberty. Her lady is even more grande up close. Truly a remarkable artwork. It just perfectly captures that moment when a picture you've seen a million times suddenly becomes real, right in front of you. But look, hitting the main attractions, that's really just scratching the surface. To find your version of New York, you've got to step off the beaten path a little. And trust me, that's where the real fun begins. So instead of just seeing the buildings, you can dive into the city's hidden stories. I mean, imagine taking a true crime tour with a retired NYPD cop, or walking through Gilded Age mansions. You can even see the entire city from a helicopter. The options are just insane.
And that same variety is true for the museum scene. Yeah, of course, you've got the giants like the Met with actual ancient Egyptian artifacts. But you can also find something totally unique, like the Museum of Sex, or something that's just pure interactive fun, like the Museum Ice Cream.
And it's not just museums. It's the same deal with theater. You could go for the massive, spectacular Broadway show like Wicked. Or you could choose something totally different, something way more intimate, kind of wild, and completely unpredictable, like an off-Broadway show called Drunk Shakespeare.
Okay, so you've got all these choices pulling you in a million directions. What do you do? Well, a local destination expert has a philosophy that really cuts through all the noise. And honestly, it's surprisingly simple.
And here it is. This is the big mindset shift. Stop trying to see everything and start trying to feel something. The real magic of New York isn't about checking things off a list. It's about plugging into the city's incredible energy.
And the best part? It's not complicated. Just find a bench and people watch. It's the best free show in town. Wander through Central Park without a map for a while. And maybe skip that tourist trap restaurant and grab a meal at a spot where locals actually go, like the Tuscan place, Felice.
Just think about how this way of thinking completely changes a landmark like Central Park. All of a sudden, it's not a checklist of fountains and bridges anymore. It becomes what it was always meant to be, a nature reserve, a little piece of the country right in the middle of the city. A place to get lost and just breathe. Okay, let's bring this all together and get practical. How do you actually plan a trip that balances seeing those iconic sights with having these really personal, authentic moments?
First things first, your timing is absolutely everything. A trip in October, when it's peak season for fall colors and everything else, is a totally different world from a trip in, say, January or February, when the cold keeps the crowds way down. Choosing a less busy month can completely change your visit.
And here are two super simple hacks that will literally save you hours. 1, book the big stuff ahead of time. A lot of the top tours and attractions do sell out. And 2, always buy your museum tickets online. You'll get to just walk right past what one person called the massive line at the door.
So at the end of the day, the perfect first trip isn't an either-or choice. It's not the checklist or the authentic experience. It's about blending them together. It's about seeing the Empire State Building and then finding a quiet little neighborhood cafe where you can just sit with a coffee and let it all sink in.
Because that's what you're really after, right? That feeling of connection, that energy. That's what makes New York so special, even for people who've lived there their whole lives. It's a feeling that just never gets old.
So as you start to plan, just ask yourself this one question. Years from now, what are you going to remember more? The photo you snapped or that one moment where you truly actually felt the heartbeat of New York City?